Hey guys, OG Albina here, bringing you guys our APA LC Evo Season 4 movie. Now, that was a mouthful. What is the APA Little Cup Evolution League, whatever it is? It's a Little Cup League, obviously, but it is what's largely considered, at least to my knowledge, in the greater part of the Showdown community, is the highest skill competition Little Cup League. We have a lot of great standard players and a lot of phenomenal Little Cup players that play in this league each and every season, and it's about as high competition as Little Cup gets, in my opinion. So I'm really excited to bring you guys another season of this. We have our last season's Evo Run, which I'll put as like a card up at the top or something like that, which is a lot of fun. I believe we lost in round 1 and round 2 of playoffs, but it was a great season. It was a great team. I had a lot of fun, and we're back for vengeance. We're here to put in a little bit of work, hopefully do well this season, and grab ourselves a championship. So if you guys do enjoy today's LC movie, you want to see more Little Cup content, be sure to drop a like as well as a sub on the channel. We're getting really close to 1,000 subs, and if you could help me out along that journey, I would appreciate it a ton. I really want to get there before Scarlet and Violet, and at the rate we're going, we might even get there before the summertime ends. So I'd really appreciate it a ton. Thank you all for the support. And yeah, comment down below. Let me know if you want to see more Little Cup content. I could bring back LC Wi-Fi potentially this summer. I could just really kind of find a bunch more LC, draft content to do. And yeah, that being said, we're going to go over our team really quick. We had like 8th pick or something like that. It was something pretty bad. Bottom half of the middle of the order, which is definitely less than ideal in Little Cup, where like the top 4 Mons are leaps and shoulders above the others. And that's not including Mienfoo, Volibee, Porygon, which we all ban. Ghastly, things like that, which we do end up banning every season. So even beyond that, the Ponytas plus the Rufflet and what's the other one? Abra are usually leaps and bounds above everything else, and from there it's kind of a free-for-all, but we end up getting a pretty cool Pokemon here that I've always wanted to try, and I feel like I could build around pretty well in Pawniard. Pawniard is an absolute menace in Little Cup. Knockoff is already probably the best move in the format, just removing items which are so important in this format, whether it be an Eviolite or a Berry Juice or a Life Orb or a Scarf, whatever it is. Nothing wants to be knocked off in this format, even more than the format above, which is amazing. When you take that into conjunction that it's a Steel type, which is very hard to find in Little Cup, at least good ones, as well as a Dark type, it has good priority in Sucker Punch, which is really important. It can Rocks, it can Swords Dance, it can even Rock Polish Up, it can be Scarf, it can Thunder Wave. It does so many different things. It's great with an Eviolite, Scarf, Life Orb, Berry Juice, a ton of different options, and I really love this thing. I think it's very solid. I think if you draft a team around it that supports it well enough, it's ridiculously hard to switch into. Nothing likes losing the item, and nothing likes getting knocked off by a Pawniard. That's for sure. Sorry, I think I accidentally popped a zit on my forehead. I don't even know. Okay, that was gross. My bad. But next up, I ended up grabbing Dewpider. I really like the idea of Webs plus Pawniard. Personally, just because of the fact that Pawniard also has Defiant, which I didn't mention. Not only can it not be deterred by Intimidate and things like that, or opposing Webs can kind of be pretty tough for people to want to set up versus me. But the other idea is that it's a great default deterrent as Dewpider sets up Webs. The Flying type might want to come in. Not only does Pawniard resist said Flying types, it can get off a big Defiant boost if they elect to go ahead and go for that default, and then kind of just OHKO everything at plus 2, which is, again, really clutch here for Pawniard. Dewpider is a great Pokemon otherwise, though. Tiro loves it. It's his forever his Discord profile picture, I feel like. And it's definitely one of his favorite mons, and I'm really excited to finally try it in like a full league setting. Water Bubble makes this thing, despite having pretty low attacking stats, ridiculously strong and hard to switch into, whether it be Scald, Surf, or Liquidation. And then Bug is a secondary typing on top of that, allows you to hit those grass types really well, and honestly just beat most of them. You can Sticky Web, we can be Scarf. Scarf Dewpider is definitely a very viable option, which is really cool as well, and it just breaks holes through teams and sets up Webs offensively, and can have some good defensive utility as well with an Eviolite or a Berry Juice. So great Pokemon overall. Next up, I ended up grabbing Meowth. Just one of my favorite Pokemon using Little Cup. This Pokemon, unlike the other two that I have used multiple times, it getting up to 19 speed with a Jolly Nature or a Timid or whatever, Naive, whatever you end up wanting to run, is insane in conjunction with this Technician ability, having moves like Fake Out and Faint and Water Pulse and things like that, boosted up by this attack, or by that ability. We can also throw off Play Rust. Double Edge is an absolute nuke from this thing. Most of the time what you're going to do is you're just going to run this set right here. In all honesty, where is 19? And we get up here, and we get up here. Oop. Sorry. We're going to go bam. We're going to go bam. Something like that. Maybe like 36 there. I guess right here. not right here because we want it to hit 19. That's really all we're going to do is we're going to be Life Orb, we're going to click buttons, we're going to do a lot of damage, and we're going to revenge kill things with phenomenal priority, which, as you can see, 2 out of our 3 members on their first 3 picks all have access to priority, which isn't going to stop here with our next pick in Croagunk. Croagunk is a great fighting type in conjunction with something like Meowth, as Meowth also does end up getting a cool little move called U-turn, allowing to U-turn out on said rock resist or said normal resist like rock types and steel types, and get into our Croagunk to click some buttons. It gives us a water immunity, which is always really clutch to have. We can vacuum wave or sucker punch for priority. We don't get Sword Dance, we get Bulk Up, which is a really cool option to set up on the physical side. We can Nasty Plot, we can be Life Orb, we can be Eevee. It's great coverage on both sides with Elemental Punches and Dark Pulse and Knock Off and a bunch of things like that. We can even Fake Out for priority as well. Just a really solid Pokemon overall. Is going to do a lot of work. Next up, I want to grab a solid rocker, a solid ground type, a solid flying resist, and my sturdy Juicemon, and that is going to be Geodude. I've drafted this thing a million times before in conjunction with sturdy. And Berry Juice. It's such a great blanket check to so many different things, especially in conjunction. Even if hazards do go up, we have access to Endure. To Endure, guaranteed live a hit, get back up to our sturdy, and live a hit guaranteed. We can Earthquake and Rock Blast through most anything. It's a very reliable rocker, and we of course have the option of going Boom on potential spinners, on potential defensive counterplay to our Edgequake combination, and things like that. It can even Rock Polish up and sweep that way, which I think is really cool. So, Geodude, a great Pokemon, very reliable, very cool mon. Now, we go from having very standard picks right here to a Pokemon I'm very excited to try and it gets way too much shit. It actually originally in like the formative years of Little Cup Draft League was a Pokemon that was in Tier 1 typically because people kind of viewed it as it would be the same as its final form with the ability it has, but unfortunately is not as good in Little Cup as it is in Standard, and that's Froakie. Froakie went from being a top tier Pokemon, or at least considered a top tier Pokemon, to being valued at like 8 points or some like Tier 3 range or something like that, and I'm here to show that it's better than that. Now, is it like a Tier 1 Pokemon or anything like that? Of course not. Is it even higher than the 8-9 points that it's usually tiered at? Maybe not. But I think this thing is at least worth drafting, and I never see anybody draft it. You don't have great coverage, but you have nice coverage with Surf, Stab, U-turns, which is great in Little Cup. We can Ice Beam, we can Hydro Pump, we have Rock Slide and Rock Tomb, we have Grass Knot, which typically isn't great in Little Cup just because things are typically a lot lighter, so that's not great, but it can also Toxic Spikes up, it can Taunt, it can be physical with Waterfall and Rock Slide and things like that. You can even Power Up Punch, Quick Attack for Stab priority, Aerial Ace for Grasses and things like that if you're a physical variant, as well as Acrobatics. So I think this thing is really solid, mostly as like a Scarfer and a Scarf roll. But I think it's solid nonetheless, and I really want to give it a shot. So hopefully Froakie puts in some work for us this season. Next up, we have our Rowlet. Rowlet is going to serve as kind of that ground immunity and resistance, as right now we don't really have great ones. We have Dewpider, which we're not going to want to use super defensively a lot of the time, but it's going to give us a grass type. It's going to give us our flyer as well. Having a good flying type is usually an important thing. Now, it doesn't get U-turn like Decidueye does, but it does get Baton Pass, which is great. And we can Brave Bird and Leaf Blade through things, which are very high base powered moves in conjunction with like a Scarf or like a boost with Swords Dance or something like that. It can put in a ton of work. We get Defog as a way of removing hazards. Potentially, we can even knock things off. It's a solid Pokemon for its price point. It's nothing insane. We can also Shadow Sneak and Sucker Punch, which is cool. But it's nothing broken. It's just a really fun mon, and I think it fits the team well and fills a couple roles that we need, especially in that Defogger role, which we don't really have any removal up to this point. Next up, I have Dratini here. This is a Pokemon I really do enjoy. Falsewood Gaming actually just did like a LC, how good was Dratini actually, and while it's not the best in Standard right now because it's definitely outshined by a lot in Draft, I think this Pokemon is phenomenal. Obviously we can set up Dragon Dances and just like Outrage through things, or Scale Shot through things, which is another cool option that it got. It gets Extreme Speed and Aqua Jet for priority, which is really clutch. We can Waterfall through potential, bulky rocks and things like that, which are typically going to be the physical walls in the tier. So a really clutch option in that regard. But another thing that it is very good at, and I think a lot of people sleep on, is its special attacking capabilities between Surf, Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Fire Blast, and Flamethrower, Draco Medium, Dragon Pulse. Like a mixed Life Orb set or just like a special Life Orb set does really well in a ton of matchups, and I'm definitely excited to use this thing. I've used it before. I think it's great in Draft, and I'm really hoping it shines again this season. And it's one of my favorite little cut mons. It's just such a cute little guy. But then next up we have our Bergmite. gives us like an obligatory spin mon, as we have a lot of hazards on our team and only can remove them with one defogger. So having one more removal option, it being spin, is definitely clutch. It's a nice physical wall. It can be boots, it can be Eevio, it can even be berry juice. Not the worst thing in the world. It doesn't get body press, which is so sad, because it would probably be pretty solid with that as a coverage option with base 85 defense, but not the biggest deal in the world, to be completely honest. Yeah, just a solid Pokemon overall. Again, really struggles with steel types because there's lack of coverage for that. No, like, Earthquake or anything like that either, but can't really expect much out of the little Ice Cube. But it's not the worst thing in the world, and it gets off spins, and it's just a good general nuisance. And again, steel types aren't super plentiful in the format. Then, lastly, we have Magikarp. I had 1 point left over. I figured it has the most utility out of all the other ones that we could have drafted. We could potentially set up Rain with something else, and then throw off Swift Swim, Life Orb, boosted Hydro Pumps off of that big base 15 special attack stat. It's fast, and there might be a matchup where it can come in and do some work. Probably not, but hey, might as well give it a go, right? But yeah, that's going to be our draft. Pretty fun team. I like it. Triple water. Magikarp doesn't really count. He's kind of there as a mascot, I'll be honest. We're probably not going to bring Magikarp this season, but might as well sell the points if we have them, and there's nothing better left. But yeah, with that being said, let's jump into our first game. Alrighty guys, here we go. Week 1, we're going up against Ian. He's got a terrifying team. Wingull, I obviously just don't deal with very well. Water plus Flying Stab just rips through me. Farfetch, same thing. Close Combat just rips through my team, and anything close combat, anything that can take close combat is ripped through by a Brave Bird from it. So again, gotta be very careful. Alolan Vulpix can overwhelm me over time, as my Ice Resist is a Pawniard, and we're a Scarf variant this week, so gotta be very careful about that. And then we have things like Cranidos, and Sandshrews annoying, and Ekans is a good pivot this game. This is going to be a very offensive game. We're going to go ahead and jump into it right away, though, as we are going to lead off with our Dratini, and our Dratini is going to be an Eviolite 4 attacks variant. We are Ice Beaming here. We're mostly special. We have Extreme Speed teched on. We're going to Ice Beam that thing for a good 90%. And based on this damage, this was a really weird calc, right? Because based on this damage, it showed me that he could have been a more offensive variant, a non-Eviolite variant. And in my head, I was thinking, oh, what if this is potentially a Custat variant, and he wants to potentially get off a big hit right here, or save this thing for later to potentially get off a big hit. But it turns out he was just a more offensive Eviolite variant, and he had no SPDF investment whatsoever, and just that 36 SPDF makes that calc a lot weirder, at least on my end, trying to read it. So this Ice Beam, this thing was Eviolite. It was very offensive, so I wasn't able to read that right away, so I'm going to go ahead and click Extreme Speed on this thing, just in case it is like a weird Custat variant. I'd like to keep my Dratini in the back, regardless, to pick off things with E-Speed, or even just to keep it as a sack, to get some chip off with E-Speed and something else a little bit later on. So I'm going to E-Speed here, as we do see Ian here switch out and go into his Vulpix. Now, if I would have dropped the big Draco into Extreme Speed, could have killed this thing, but it's not the biggest deal in the world because we do a ton of damage. We're going to pivot into our Pawniard, take that free strike pretty well, and just throw off a Scarf knockoff because it's, you know, pretty darn free, and knocking out the Sandshrew, which it does turn out to be Eviolite, like we said, so it's a bit unfortunate. And then we're going to see Cranidos come in, and I know you're going to see, I'm going to stay in and knock this thing off, because if you look at my team, I don't switch into this Pokemon in the slightest. Just Rock plus either Ground or Psychic coverage just kind of demolishes my team, at least the draft, or the team that I ended up bringing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay and I'm going to knock this thing off, see what its item is, get a little bit of information off, and, you know, we'll be able to potentially go from there, as I don't think I need my Pawniard to win. It's very good, don't get me wrong. Ironhead was definitely a viable endgame, Scarf Ironhead that is, but I don't need it, per se, as I am going to knock this thing off, do 69, and then knock off its Choice Scarf, and I'm very glad I ended up knocking this thing's Choice Scarf off, because it could have been a terrifying endgame threat. I'm going to be able to go into my Meowth here, and just off a big Water Pulse. I know that the Intim Ekans could be a possibility, but there's not a good Water Pulse pivot, and Water Pulse is going to do a ton to this thing on switch in. Good 44%, meaning I can potentially 2-hit KO it next time it comes in, or just even OHKO it with a double edge or something like that, which is, again, very valuable. Let's go back a little bit. I make the pivot into my Dewpider, as I know I can take any one hit from it, get my juice back, and then Sticky Web up on him. But Ian's going to make a very good double here, getting into the Cranios and realizing this is how I get damage off on my opponent's team. He's going to click the Zen Headbutt, potentially expecting the Krogunk. I'm just going to sack off my Dratini, so keeping that sack in the back was very clutch, And from here, I'm going to go for a Stealth Rock. The reason I go for a Stealth Rock is in case there's like some weird Sash Wingull, or I need to put it in range of a Fake Out from Meowth, which rocks do put it in range of that. It is going to chip down things like Ekans on the switch in, whereas if it is Juice, it'll switch in, pop that Juice, and then I'll be able to double edge it and do a ton of damage with that, and that way. And we're limiting switch-ins for the Cranidos and the Vulpix and things like that as well. So I figured Rocks would be just a nice option here, as nothing he can do can OHKO me. He is going to go for the Rock Slide though, which is definitely a fair play, breaking my Sturdy and putting me in range of an Earthquake without proccing my Juice, which is again absolutely terrifying. Now, for those of you who don't know, the reason Ian didn't go for an Earthquake Rock here is obviously it does way more damage, and he definitely does have it on this thing. Is because I'm at Sturdy, I will go down to either Sturdy or maybe even a little bit above it and just get my Berry Juice and go right back up to full, and he actually loses momentum that way. This way, it puts me in a pretty tough position where I'm kind of guaranteed to sack something here unless I play pretty particularly, as I am going to choose to pivot into my Dewpider on this very obvious Earthquake, take a good 23%, which is unfortunate, but not unrecoverable from, and then I'm going to pivot right back into my Geodude because I know another Rock Slide will, despite critting me, even if it didn't crit me, put me in range of my Berry Juice. Now I'll be at full again. I'll be able to take this hit, knock out the Cranidos, and put myself in a decent position. Out comes Wingull. I'm just going to sack this off if he wants to get aggressive. I believe I just click Rock Blast or Explosion, one of the two, to ensure that I knock this thing out. Then I can go to my Meowth for free, just click Life Orb, Fake Out, and knock that thing right out, which is great. Ekans is going to be next. We are going to see it come in, take Rock, and pop its Berry Juice, which is, again, very good information for me. And I'm going to go to my Dewpider, and he is going to miss his Gunk Shot. And this is very, very unfortunate for Ian, because while I live this hit, it's not going to allow me to do what I really wanted to do in this instance, in the sense that now what I can do, since I took the hit I needed to, not only can I live this Gunk Shot, I'll be able to get my Juice, get all the way back up to full, and get at my Sticky Web, while also getting Scald Chip off on this Ekans, bring it down to just 5%, which is incredibly clutch. She's going to Earthquake and knock me out, because if I don't get at my webs there, and I don't get the Scald damage off, I don't have anything that can necessarily guarantee OHKO this thing. Now, there are endgames in which I can still win, right? It really depends on what Ian does, because what I can do is, if I don't end up getting off that damage, I can Fake Out into Double Edge and basically claim a KO guaranteed. It's just a matter of if he wants to save his Ekans for in-tim pivots and things like that. The game gets a lot more messy and a lot more tough for me to potentially win it, whereas I think him missing that Gunk Shot basically sealed it, because this thing dies to rocks, there is no saving it really. I can just go into this, click Water Pulse, really click anything, it didn't really matter too much, and then just sack off my Meowth right here. Because Double Edge will do a ridiculous amount. It'll kill a Scarf variant, and if he's like an Eviolite variant, which he turned out to be, I can just go into my Croagunk and revenge it the turn afterwards, which is great. Close Combat's going to come off. I am going to go down there, obviously, but then I can go into my Croagunk and hopefully seal the game, as I am going to Drain Punch. We're not going to play around this thing. Brave Birdie me, no reason to set up. I don't even remember if I was set up this game, but from here, provide no freezes, which we don't get frozen, we can knock this thing out with the Drain Punch. It shows to be Scarfed by that, obviously, as well. And we're going to go ahead and win this game 1-0. An absolute nail biter, but most Little Cup games end up being very, very close like this. So I'm glad we could pull off the win against Ian and start off the season with a W. With that being said, let's jump on to week 2. Alright, week 2, we have a game against Firefin. He's got my absolute favorite Little Cup Pokemon of all time in Ponyta. I'm not looking forward to taking that thing on, as well as monsters like Dwebble and Snivy, which are really tough for our more offensively oriented team. They can really snowball and get out of hand fast. Honedge is a pretty annoying piece as well. It's a great Meowth check, or at least a great Meowth pivot, if you can get it on the right turns and not on knockoffs or Dark Pulses, hint hint. So, you know, it's definitely a pretty scary team. I'm not too, you know, knowing as to why Venonat ended up coming, but the, what do you call it, makes sense as well. The Finneon, because it is a water immunity, it pivots well into the Dewpider, and it has things like Air Cutter as well to be able to hit the Dewpider, especially if they end up getting that boost. But that being said, let's go ahead and jump on into it. He's going to lead off with Dwebble. I'm going to lead off with my Meowth. I'm a Life Orb variant like you typically do see on Meowth, but I'm actually a special variant. I have Hyper Voice, Dark Pulse, and Water Pulse. It does really, really well in this matchup. If you look, we still do have Fake Out in order to break Sturdies and things like that. I'm kind of wishing I had Faint in order to guarantee break this thing Sturdy, especially if this is a lead variant, where it's probably going to try and set up a bunch of hazards on me, as my removal is pretty darn subpar. It's probably going to have Protect on it, so if I ended up having Faint into Water Pulse would have killed this thing, and I would have been in a good position, or at least force this thing out. So he is going to click Protect here, unfortunate, but I don't have Faint, so there's not really much I can do in that instance. I'm going to click Hyper Voice here. The reason I clicked Hyper Voice is because via the calcs, Dark Pulse a good majority of the time, an overwhelming majority of the time, was a 2-hit KO, and I don't want to put this thing below 50%, kind of like the Geodude last game with Ian not wanting to put me below 50%, because it's just going to get back up to full and get it sturdy back, and that just ensures either more hazards, me getting knocked off, me even getting knocked out, things like that. So I figured it was not worth it. I can go ahead and throw off a Hyper Voice, and then go ahead and knock it out with a Water Pulse the turn afterwards, which is what we're going to elect to do right here. He is going to protect once again, as I do go for the Water Pulse, and because of this, I figured he may want to save this thing, plus the fact that Dark Pulse a majority of the time does knock this out. I don't remember the exact roll, but I believe it was pretty heavily in my favor. If I Dark Pulse right here, I can knock this thing out, catch a Hone Edge coming in, or just do more damage to something like a Snivy or a Finneon or something like that one to come in as a good mid-ground play. So I am going to go for the Dark Pulse. He does end up staying in, and I only do 48, and you're going to see that is a incredibly low roll right here, as we unfortunately don't knock it out, but fortunately enough, we do end up getting a flinch, which is going to be really, really clutch for us. Now I can go for Dark Pulse again, do 61%, so I think you see the little bit of a difference there in the little cup rolls. But we're going to do a good 61 and get a double flinch. And this is terrible for Firefan. I'm going to knock him out with a Water Pulse. He realistically should have gotten at least one, maybe even two more layers of hazards up, or a big knockoff on my Meowth. And he basically only got one spike out of the exchange because I got pretty fortunate. Now, granted, that Dark Pulse roll was pretty much in my favor, but that's a little cup, especially, we can't complain about rolls in a format like this. So that was incredibly unfortunate for him, as he is going to go onto his Hone Edge. This turn, I am just going to throw off a Dark Pulse. I want to do as much damage to this thing as possible. It is going to reveal to be a Colbur Berry set, and Autotomize is going to come out right here as well, getting it to +2 speed. From here, I feel pretty darn comfortable pivoting my Dewpider on a Sacred Sword, on a Close Combat, anything like that, as I am an Eviolite variant, and I can't take any hit afterwards, even a Rock Slide, so provided we don't get flinched, we could just knock this guy right out, which is great. Next up, we're going to have Snivy come out. I'm pretty comfortable with letting this thing go down. I'm sure you saw that land to the right. I'm pretty comfortable with letting this thing go down, as I do need to just get into something else and revenge kill this thing. This mon is terrifying, and if I let it get up a free sub, and now I don't think it's going to be sub because I can be Bug Buzz, and I am Bug Buzz. It's definitely a potential option I want to cover, and I don't think I need my 35% Dewpider anymore to win this game. I died to any pony hit now. I can potentially get 1v1 by Finneon, and depending on the Venusette set, I can also lose that. So at this point, I'm just trying to sack it off and Bug Buzzing to prevent any shenanigans, but he is going to miss, unfortunately. And because I'm a modest Dewpider, I just knocked that thing out from full. It was probably a Scarf variant, which could have been potentially game-ending in the right situation. So we are going to go down there. Finneon is going to be forced to come out. This is a pretty tough game, though, for my opponent. Air Cutter is only going to do 26 because I am Eviolite and pretty bulky. And I'm going to get a big Giga Drain off here. As you're going to see, I only do about 36, and I'm really only getting enough to live one more Air Cutter after this, so I figured it was in my best interest at this point to try and get up my webs. We're going to get a Little Cup rolled, though, and get knocked out there, as I'm going to send in my Pawniard and throw off a knockoff, which seems a little bit perilous, being that there still is a Ponyta there, and it's typically going to switch in, take the knockoff, potentially try and burn me, some shenanigans like that. But we are a Lumberry variant. The reason we were Lum was obviously for this guy, but it also covered Glare from Snivy. It covered Sleep Powder shenanigans from the Venonat and things like that as well. So I figured it was pretty important to have. And then I'm going to put it out in my Dratini, which is honestly my favorite set. This Wismiss, it kind of looks like Salt in the Wound, but honestly, I wanted him to burn me. I am a Marvel Scale Eviolite Rest Talk variant with Dragon Pulse Flamethrower, and you can see, obviously, this set kind of wins the game from this position, unfortunately for my opponent. I think, in general, once, Dwebble went down, there was not really a way to knock me off. Dwebble and Snivy, in case Snivy had knock as well. There wasn't a great way for my opponent to kind of break this Pokemon. As you're going to see, that only does, 30%, and I'm going to be in a pretty good spot. I just Flamethrower one more time, knock out the Venonat, and then last up is just the Finneon. I believe I Dragon Pulse one more time, and now provided we dodge a crit from the Air Cutter, we should be fine, as we are. We're going to rest up, because I am going to play for my differential at this point. I'm going to get a nice 5-0 victory. Now, again, they're pretty fortunate in this game. Little Cup always seems to just be a Haxier metagame, but I will always take, a little bit of luck on my side. I think you need luck in order to be successful in this format, in this game, and, luck favored us this time. So I do apologize to Firefin. I know he ended up having a great season overall, so it was just kind of a bump in the road for him, but, pretty unfortunate nonetheless. I would be super frustrated if I were him. But yeah, that being said, let's jump on to week 3. Alright, week 3, we got the Beardy Dragon, and of course, he has big Rufflet there, and Rufflet's a terrifying Pokemon for those of you who don't know. Largely considered the best Pokemon in the format by many, just to how ridiculously strong it is with Hustle Boosted Hits, Hustle Boosted Brave Birds, close combats and U-turns and air releases for reliability, whether it be a Scarf variant or a what do you call it, or like a bulk up Eviolite Roost variant and things like that. It's terrifying to deal with, and in particular, like I said, my team does kind of struggle with flying spam, as Geodude does kind of get pushed through by a lot of them, but most teams are kind of weak to flying spam. But yeah, he's got some more cool other threats we have to take into account. I love Smoochum. I think in particular Smoochum is good versus me. Offensive ice types are good versus me because my ice resist is Pawniard, and it's not the bulkiest thing in the world, obviously. Trapinch is really, really good into me. Diglett is really good into me. Anorith is good into me. And Cottony can do a plethora of things that are really annoying. So he's got a pretty terrifying team here. Let's go ahead and jump into it, though, right away. I'm going to lead off with my Dewpider, as we are going to see the Rufflet lead. Now, I'm not a Sash variant, I am not a Berry Juice variant or anything, or I'm not an Eviolite variant, I'm not a Koba Berry variant. Eviolite would definitely die through that. But I am going to kind of be forced to switch out here. I can't risk him staying in and just Brave Birding, as it is kind of a viable play for him. As Geodude, you're going to see he's going to come in and take a ridiculous amount just from U-turn. So Brave Bird would have done comparable damage, and, you know, he would have been, you know, not the worst spot in the world, because even if I Rock Step, he has ways of removing that. I'm going to pivot into my Dewpider on this Diglett. Earthquake is going to do a ton, and in my head, I don't know why, I was kind of sitting here. I remember this play specifically as I was sitting here and I was like, okay, well, now I live and I get up my webs, or I throw off a big Surf and I do a lot of damage to something coming in, Surf or Scald, whatever one I ended up having in that game. I was like, all right, I'm fine. Not really realizing that it's a little bit stronger than I gave it credit for, and I should probably look at my calcs pre-game or even during game to realize that I just died to Rock Slide here. I could have made some pivots, I could have done something, and not been absolutely boned, but unfortunately Dewpider is going to go down. I'm going to go right onto my Froakie, though, as offensively Froakie is phenomenal in this game. We are a Chore Scarf variant, we are allowed to be Protean, and despite Protean Gren being like obviously a broken Pokemon, Froakie is a pretty slept on Mon, and I don't think a lot of people gave it the respect it deserved this season. Not saying Beardy didn't, but in general, I was excited to use this thing, and this being its debut, it pops off a little bit, so I was definitely excited for this one. We're going to have Froakie pivot out here on the Cottony, though, as we are going to see our Pawniard come in and get 2-hit KO'd because this is a Life Orb Cottony, which is a very, very cool bring, as my Steel type, it doesn't resist Fairy. So an offensive Cottony definitely made a lot of sense, and it's actually just going to catch me for a nice 2-hit KO here. I'm not a Scarf variant. And it's just going to do a ridiculous amount of damage, which is pretty unfortunate. I'm going to go onto my Meowth right here, as we do just throw off a big Double Edge. It'll pretty much claim me a KO pretty easily here. I can Double Edge into Water Pulse pretty much everything. I do have Protect for the Trapinch as well, which is a very valuable tool, as I am going to throw off said Double Edge, take a bunch of recoil damage as I crit that thing. I would actually probably rather not crit it, so I don't take as much recoil, but I'm going to Protect on the first impression here, and then from here, I'll just off Water Pulse. It's going to feint me, just to do a lot of damage. No, I just Double Edge. I probably should have Water Pulse, but whatever. Take a lot of damage. The Anorith is going to come out, maybe thinking I don't have Water Pulse because I didn't click it, so maybe that saved my ass. I'm just going to knock it out raw there, which is great, and then Smoochum's going to come out, kind of scouting for Scarf. I am going to just go ahead and click Protect, see what it wants to click. It ends up clicking Psychic. I'm pretty okay with sacking off my Geodude. Maybe I can get some fake out chip a little bit later on with my Meowth, or find out that this thing is not Scarfed and just be able to throw off a big Double Edge. I fake out first, obviously, to see if this thing, you know, I can break a potential Sash. It turns out not to be Sash and just drops to a Double Edge, which is great. I'm able to go into my Froakie here, just throw off a big Ice Beam, chip some things down into range. I am going to be able to 2-hit KO that Eviolite Froakie there. Again, ridiculously bulky. That's Stab Ice Beam coming off of Froakie's pretty decent special attack. Thankfully, we do live, and we're able to 2-hit KO the last two members. We outsped Cottony anyway, so Tailwind wasn't the worst play in the world. They covered me choking, I suppose. And yeah, we're going to win 2-0. Froakie's debut grabs a good, what, 3 kills minimum, right? It grabbed 3, and then Meowth got together 3, so pretty cool to see it pop off. I love me some Froakie, and yeah, with that being said, let's jump into week 4. Alrighty guys, here with week 4, we're going up against Peachy here, and Peachy has a very interesting team. They have an Abra, which is really scary versus me, in particular something like a sub-Life Orb variant, like a sub-Drain Punch variant, or even just Drain Punch in general if it catches my Pawniard on the switch, and kind of 6-0s my team, if you look at it, in conjunction with like Psychic, plus potentially like Energy Ball, I guess. Dazzling is another good mid-ground, kind of hits Pawniard really hard, as well as like just Okoing Dratini as well. So I think that can be very, very scary for me to deal with. I think Crabrawler is a little bit annoying, but then the rest of the team I feel like I deal with pretty well. No, Houndour is pretty annoying as well, but then like that fat balanced core of Hippo, Munchlax, and Marini, while it is tough for some teams to break, I think with how inherently offensive our build is and our team in general, we can exploit those Pokemon pretty darn well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. We're going to go ahead and lead off with our Dewpider into a Hippopotas. If you look at my opponent's team, there's no removal, so if I get up webs, they are there to stay, and that's amazing for me. I can live anyone hit from literally everything on this team, so there's no reason for me to not lead my Dewpider and immediately get up webs, which is obviously going to be great for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and get up those webs. I'm an EV Light variant, so again, I would even live a hit from Abra or something like that. And we're going to see the Sand pop right here. I'm going to get knocked off, and this turn I ended up clicking Mirror Coat, and in hindsight, it's a pretty bad play. Knockoff was definitely my opponent's play. It was pretty darn free against my team. If anything, I should have just clicked Liquidation, gotten a little bit chip, maybe even gotten a defense drop, and, been in a good position from there. And then maybe pivoted out into my Krogunk, because Knockoff was incredibly obvious there. It doesn't want to Scald, obviously, into my Water Bubble Dewpider or my, well, I guess Water Bubble doesn't really that. More so my Dry Skin Krogunk and let it in for free. So I definitely think I probably shouldn't have Mirror Coated. If anything, I should have gotten off of Liquidation, pivoted out the turn after. It's still going to kind of work the same way, as we are going to Mirror Coat here. And now I am going to pivot out, because this thing still is really good offensively and outspeeds pretty much everything minus Scarfers and Abra. So I might as well save my Dewpider. I do get out into my Krogunk, and I'm just going to click a mean EQ here. Do a clean 59%, which is nice, as we do take a knockoff and lose our Life Orb. Not the biggest deal in the world, though, because I feel very comfortable in just going for a nice Ice Punch here. It catches a Hippo mid-ground, lets me see what item it is, let me see the spread, things like that, as well as just hitting everything else really, really hard. So, and they're definitely not just going to sack off the Marini, and even if they do, there's not much it can really do to me. It can knock me off again, really, that's it. But I am just going to Ice Punch there, only do 33, showing that that is definitely an EV Light variant. It is kind of forced to slack off here, and this is kind of what I mean, and like the passivity of like a fatter, balanced team like this, is Hippo can come in, yeah, I can take that hit from Krogunk very well, but then I get a free switch into my Dewpider, and with how low this Marini is, this is a KO right now. There's nothing my opponent can do to stop me from clicking Liquidation twice and picking one up pretty much. As we are going to go ahead and click Liquidation twice, pick off that Marini, which was a roll in my favor despite that first lower roll, and then be in a good spot. This next turn, Crabrawler's going to come out. It is going to show to be a Choice Scarf variant right here, and outspeeding my Dewpider, as I was pretty darn fast, so I could outspeed things like that under webs, which allows me a free Geodude and allows me a free Stealth Rock right here. Again, just kind of stacking up those hazards, really chipping things down as they come in. Not necessarily the Abra, but other things is definitely nice. I'm going to go hard Dratini on rocks, as I don't really need health on this thing either, and I can kind of just Ice Beam this thing for a free 2-hit KO right now, and again, put myself in a pretty solid spot. Next up, Houndour is going to come out right here. It's going to get hit by the webs, it's going to get Ice Beamed and frozen. And this is pretty unfortunate for my opponent if they are Sucker Punch or Scarf. If they're Sucker Punch or Scarf, they could have potentially picked me off here and been in an okay position, though I was completely fine with sacking off my Dratini in this instance and taking this free damage on Houndour. And if they are not, they're just going to get KO'd by my next attack, which you're going to see I am going to actually outspeed and just knock out this Houndour. So if they had Sucker, they didn't click it, and they weren't Scarf. So you can say what you want. I don't know if that matters all too much. But yeah, I'm going to go into my, they're going to go into Crabrawler. I'm just going to get some E-Speed chip off, as I don't see a real reason to save this thing as low as it is, as I feel pretty comfortable against the Abra. And then I'm going to get into my Krogunk, knowing it's locked into Drain Punch, and I can just click a Drain Punch of my own. There's not a Pokemon that really switches into this. Abra is the fighting resist at this point, and Hippo is 2-hit KO by Drain Punch and Ice Punch. So I'm just going to continuously spam that Drain Punch, get back up to full, which is awesome. Then Abra's going to come out. I'm just going to go ahead and click Sucker. I don't want to allow this thing, I don't really switch into this thing, if that makes any sense. And it'll kind of let me scout and see what this thing wants to go for, if it's like a sub variant. But they're actually going to pivot out into Hippo, which was definitely interesting. Maybe just scouting to see if I had Sucker Punch, which I do, obviously. And this next turn, I'm just going to throw off an Ice Punch, kind of reserving this thing to be sack piece. And we're going to get another freeze. This one definitely sucks for differential. And again, it seems like I'm getting very lucky this game, but I really think this just matters for diff, because this thing's super low. I guess they could have slacked off, but I could have taken advantage of it otherwise and been in an okay spot. I was just going to spam Ice Punch to keep it low for the rest of my team, but we're going to be able to 2-hit KO it here. And then Abra's going to come out. I'm just going to go hard Geodude, as I don't really need it anymore. It doesn't really beat anything on my opponent's teams. And I can live a Psychic after rocks because of the Sandstorm that is up. Get my juice back, get up to full, and then break this thing Sash, or just knock it out. It does prove to be Sash. The reason I didn't click Rock Blast for the potential KO is because I didn't need to, and I would rather guaranteed break this Sash so that I can go into my Meowth and clean up the game. So we're going to go down here. Meowth's going to come out. Even if this is Protect, we're fine. We're going to go for a Feint here, which would have broken through the Protect, and then we're going to be able to knock out the Crabrawler here for a nice, easy 3-0 victory. We got pretty fortunate in that game hacks-wise, but realistically, at the end of the day, I don't think it mattered all too much other than diff. Maybe the Hippo one mattered a little bit more, but definitely not the Houndour one, in my opinion, unless they just didn't click the Sucker, and they had it. Who knows, though? But, yeah, that's going to be week 4. I'll be right back with week 5. All right, week 5, we're going up against my good buddy, Tiro. A familiar face on the channel. I'm sure you guys know Tiro. He's been playing Wi-Fi as of like the last year or so. He won a championship at SBU. He just made finals in NCP. He's a great player, but what you guys don't know is he's even better at Little Cup. One of the best Little Cup players in the format, really ever. This is his domain, and he's got a really scary Sun team, so I was excited to play him, but I was definitely nervous too as well. But definitely go check out tier in the description below. Anybody I play that like uploads, I'll definitely link them down below. I think our next 2 games are only ones where people do upload. But go check out Tiro and tell him to upload some Little Cup content, because he's even better than me at it, in my opinion. So definitely go check him out. He's got a really scary team here, though, in the Tyrant, which is terrifying. Baltoy, which is a great spinner versus my team, which is really annoying. Vulpix, Riolu, which he's been killing with. Slowpoke for great momentum purposes, and Thunderwave speed control. And then Bulbasaur, who's always terrifying in conjunction with Weather Ball, and it stabs, especially versus my team. So we're going to have to be very, very careful. I think I have a pretty fun team here in this game, though. And I was pretty excited with how it ended up playing out. It was a great, really close game. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to lead off with my Froakie. He's going to lead off with Tyrant. This isn't going to be the stereotypical Froakie that I've brought in to all of my other games, if that makes any sense. I'm actually, instead of like a Scarf variant with like U-turn, stuff like that, I'm a 4 attacks Focus Sash variant with like Rock Tomb, Ice Beam, Grass Knot, and Acrobatics. I forget if it was Ice Beam or Surf. It was one of those 2. But it's a pretty interesting set here. We're going to go ahead and have the Slowpoke come out here as I do end up Rock Tombing. We're going to do a decent chunk to it. And actually, despite Grass Knot being pretty bad in Little Cup, historically, just because things are smaller, therefore they don't weigh as much, so Grass Knot doesn't do that much. Stab Grass Knot does a ton to Slowpoke. It guaranteed 2-hit KO hit after any chip, so that Rock Tomb is definitely going to put it in a 2-hit KO range, so that's what I'm going to click. I'm going to click Grass Knot and do a ton of damage, especially because I crit. And this is really unfortunate for Tiro, because I'm going to be allowed to keep my Sash and guarantee get off a hit on something else coming in, which is really unfortunate for him, especially if he ended up like Thunder Waving. He could have pivoted around me that way, something like that. So that was definitely a pretty tough turn of events for Mr. Tiro. But we do get a KO early, which is great. Vulpix is going to come out, and like I said, I'm a Focus Sash variant. He could win a Speed Tire, he could even be Scarf, but I'll at least get that information. I'll get some big Rock Tomb damage off, which is phenomenal for me. And if I break my Sash, Rock Tomb into Acro is really strong against the rest of his team. So I am just going to go ahead and click that Rock Tomb. He is going to bring me down a Sash, thankfully not burn me, but I'm going to miss my Rock Tomb. And I think that's kind of justice. I feel like it kind of makes up for what happened before, unless he really needed Slowpoke for something else. But I don't really think he did. It was actually pretty bad versus my team, in all honesty. But after we go down here, I am just going to go into my Geodude, and then make a quick double out into my Dewpider. I did not expect Bulbasaur to come in. What I expected to come in was Baltoy, because I think rocks are extremely detrimental to Tiro, unless he's like a Boots Vulpix, which I definitely don't think he is, or if he's like, you know, for his Tyrant sturdy as well. So I figured he didn't want rocks up, and I think that Geodude is very easy for Baltoy to potentially spin on, unless I'm faster than it for some reason and can boom first, but I doubt that to be the case. So I doubled into Dewpider to try and get that thing in and get at my webs or exert some offensive pressure in that way, which is Bug Stab. But unfortunately, it's not going to go down that way. He is going to get into his Bulbasaur, and just to attack this thing and break a potential Sash, I am going to Leech Life it and do a good amount of damage, and then throw off a big Protect here. Just count and see what he wants to go for, but as well as stall the last Sun turn if it is not a Heat Rock Vulpix, which is, again, very nice for me. So I am going to Giga Drain here. The Sun is going to stay up, showing that it is a Heat Rock Vulpix, and then I'm going to make the pivot into my Bulbasaur, knowing that I can take any one hit, I can take any one Giga Drain at least, get back up to full, and then, you know, be able to kind of threaten this thing offensively from here. I am going to just go ahead and click Boom this game, as he does stay in to Giga Drain me, and this is completely fine, because Boom kind of netted me a KO this turn, unless he went hard Tyrant, which would have been a very aggressive play, and I would have taken the damage on that thing in all honesty too, because it probably wouldn't have brought it into juice range, which would have been better for me. So I am just going to go ahead and click Boom, knock this Bulbasaur right out, and be in a good spot going forward. So now in a 4-4 game, we're going to double down here. He's going to go into the Tyrant. I'm going to go into Pawniard. I know that EQ can knock me out from here, as I don't believe I'm an Eviolite variant in this game. All my teams got deleted prior to like week 7, because this league has obviously been going on for a while. So I don't really have a way to look back at my old teams. I'm kind of watching through these games before and trying to remember what I had. But I don't believe I was an Eviolite variant. I believe I did just die to EQ a good majority of the time. But I can't allow this thing to set up. I may have even been Scarf in this game, as I do just go ahead and click Knock. I'm going to get a crit, which is nice, but doesn't matter all too much in the grand scheme of things. He's going to be Berry Juice. We're going to take a big EQ and get knocked right out here, which is unfortunate, but it's going to allow me to go into my Meowth, just click Fake Out, and net me a KO. Maybe I should just double edge there, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. Riolu's going to come in next, and I'm going to make the play of just going for a double edge. I don't want to allow this thing, like, free setup or just, you know, a free switch out into something else. I kind of need damage on it in order for things like Dewpider to knock it out. And I could have also been, like, a play rough variant, so if I was Life Orb play rough, he could have taken a lot more from that, and again, been in a very tough position, so I am just going to go for that double edge. Be in a tough position if you elected to set up, that is. So he's just going to go for a Drain Punch, knock me out, but that 70% chip is very, very clutch for me, as I am going to get out into my Dewpider for free now, and just live that Rock Slide and knock this Riolu out hard with a Liquidation, which is, again, amazing. Next up, Baltoy's going to come out, it's going to knock me out with a Psychic, and this looks pretty dire for your hero. One Mon left is just Dratini. However, Tiro doesn't have a Fairy on his draft, nor a Dragon Resist in like a Steel type. So I am a Dragon Dance outraging Dratini, and provided I don't get super unlucky in this endgame, I'm actually in a phenomenal spot to win because I just DD up and I outrage through his team. Provided I don't get frozen on this thing or just like confusion cheesed, I should be okay. So that being said, we're gonna go ahead, Dragon Dance up. We're gonna see that we do indeed live this Ice Beam and we do not get frozen. It's gonna allow me to outrage and knock out this Baltoy. Thing's really, really strong. Shouts to Dratini. And then we're going to be able to outrage once again, but he clicks Protect. Thankfully, we don't get the 2-turn outrage. He doesn't get the double Protect, and we're able to very cleanly knock out this Vulpix and grab a 1-0 victory against Tiro. Absolutely terrifying game. It was incredibly close, but I had a lot of fun playing it, and Dratini was able to clutch up once again. So Dratini and Froakie really proving to be some of my favorite mons on this team, despite me not thinking that they would be that good, in all honesty, but you know, they put in a lot of work, which is awesome. I'll be right back with Week 6. Week 6, we got our good buddy Amo. Like I said, someone else is probably familiar to those of you who have been around on the channel before. Great player, but if you know Amo, you also know he loves to, you know, partake in some shenanigans, especially with his teams and his drafts. And Amo's a great little cut player, but he decided to go mono water this season. He drafted only water-type Pokemon. Therefore, his season, unfortunately, didn't have the greatest turnout. He had a pretty tough season, which is honestly pretty impressive how well he did and how many games he brought that were like super close considering he had mono water. But obviously this is a little bit less serious of a game in the sense that I'm 5-0. I have clinched playoffs in an 8-week league guaranteed. And Amel is guaranteed out of playoffs at this point. I believe he is 0-5 up to this point. Actually, fun fact about this game, we were sitting on call. I had just played Tiro from the last game, and me and Amel were supposed to play the next week, and Amel wasn't calling, you know, he was watching us play and stuff like that, and I was like, hey, run it right now, and he's like, no, I don't want to. I was like, alright, then you're pussy, and Amel in his French accent said, no, I'm not, and immediately pulled and played me. I played this game same day, I'm sure you can see, May 12th, so he played both these games the same day. I prepped really, really fast, but it was a lot of fun for sure, and yeah, I'm definitely excited to show you guys this one. Alright, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. I am going to lead off with my Rowlet. This is the first game Rowlet has come. It is a Choice Scarf Rowlet in this game, as Leaf Blade is pretty darn free against his team. Unfortunately, he leads Chinchou, and if he is an Eviolite Chinchou or a Scarf Chinchou, both of those outcomes are bad for me, and I don't want to sack it off just yet. So I figured I might as well pivot into my Geodude against the Mono Rock team, go down to Sturdy, get my juice up, and exert a little bit of offensive pressure, because Amel doesn't have a ground resist really. His ground resist is Surskit. That's not really a ground resist, at the end of the day. So I thought it was pretty nice to potentially be able to do so. And Amel had just got done dirty by a Choice Scarf Rhyhorn in one of his previous games by Josh, so I figured it might be good to give him a little bit of PTSD with these rock ground types from Gen 1. So we're going to go into our Geodude as he makes a double out into Skrelp. That's completely fine with me. I'm just going to go ahead and click Earthquake, do 52 to this Surskit. Now, provided we don't get burned, we could just knock him out the next turn with another Earthquake, which is, again, absolutely fine for me. It's perfect, in fact, as I am going to knock out said Surskit, still be at my Sturdy, so I'm going to be able to throw off a big hit on this Kabuto right here as it gets brought down to its Focus Sash, which is honestly completely fine for me. I'm going to elect to get up my rocks as he does, but in hindsight, probably not the smartest play as he can just spin them away the next turn, though he does allow me to knock out his Kabuto, which is, again, very, very nice for us. So next up, Chinchou's going to come out. I believe I just clicked Earthquake, no reason not to. He's going to knock me out the Surf. This is going to allow me a pretty free switch into my Meowth. He is going to reveal the Protect, which is pretty darn unfortunate because Protect into like Seed Bomb could have potentially knocked this thing out depending on its spread. We're going to see that we're going to do a good 64 there and live. So we have one more turn of Life Orb. I'm going to click a mid-ground Double Edge as there is no normal resist. The Skrelp's going to reveal to be Juice, but we at least pop that, and Meowth is going to break through a little bit here. I'm going to go into my Dewpider, and while I can't necessarily beat the Skrelp 1v1, what I can do is get up my Sticky Web, which will allow me to kind of clean up with my Pawniard here in a minute. So I am going to get up said Sticky Webs. He is going to Sludge Wave, and from here, I believe I just go ahead and spam Giga Drain until the cows come home. Get a little bit of damage off on this Skrelp, and put myself in a good position. I get out into my Pawniard right here, as he does end up clicking the Flip Turn. I knew I'd live any one hit, though. And then from there, I just go ahead and I click Knock Off, and I win the game. There's not really much he can do about it. He's going to reveal the Protect, but then reveal to be Rattled, Max Defense, Eviolite Clamperl with Shell Smash. No, it's no item Clamperl with Shell Smash. So this was terrifying because I could 100% lose to this, and this is just like a product of Amol being an absolute crackhead. He outspeeds and can OHKO my entire team, realistically. So I need to win some Sucker Punch mind games. This first turn, he is going to click Protect. I click Sucker. The next turn, I'm going to click Sucker again and knock him out. And we got a little too lost in the sauce right there and thought I would knock off turn 2, which is honestly an aggressive play I would make and have made before in like these Sucker 50-50s. But I was playing a little bit more safe. I was probably honestly going to click Sucker until I had no more left. So being able to knock that thing out was incredibly clutch. Spheel's going to come out. At this point, the game is over, though. As cute as Spheel is, there's not much it can do to live a +2 Pawniard hit or threaten it back in return. So I'm just going to kind of spam Knock Off until the cows come home. It's a pretty simple endgame. So very scary considering we could have totally lost to this thing. Spheel's going to come back out. I think I Saws on right here and I Swords Dance just to flex, as I felt pretty comfortable in my endgame. But yeah, we're going to get up to +4, and now everything guaranteed dies. It kills like 2 Spheels instead of 1. But yeah, we're going to grab a nice 3-0 victory here, moving ourselves to, I believe, 6-0 in the season. Very firmly cementing ourselves not only in playoffs, but at the top of the seeds. We're going to crit and knock out this field, which is just extra mean. So sad. But yeah, that's going to be our Week 6 game against Amol. I'll jump on to our next game. Alright, so we're back with our Week 8 battle. Yes, Week 8. We skipped over Week 7 because I actually ended up getting a forfeit win that week, so they just couldn't play. He was too busy. So we're 7-0 right now. We're playing up against Josh, who is also having a phenomenal season. So another person who uploads. Josh was, I think, the 2nd seed at this point. He'd been killing it throughout the season, and I didn't really want to reveal anything super crazy in this matchup, so this was like a 5-minute built team we're going to run through. Now, obviously, I'm going to try to win. I would love to have a perfect 8-0 season. I think that would be awesome, but I'm not super stressing about winning this game or losing it, as I am clinched for playoffs, and this potential semifinals, finals opponent, depending on how the seeding lines up and things like that. You know, how we obviously do in playoffs. So, you're going to see his team. It's pretty scary. He's got the Rhyhorn, which he beat the Mono Water team with, which is pretty cool. He's got Galarian Ponytail, which is terrifying versus me on the physically offensive side. The Q-Fant, which is also very, very scary. Snubble's annoying. Stunky is annoying to switch into as well, and there's a lot of scary things. So, that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. He is going to lead off with his Rhyhorn. I'm going to lead off with my Dewpider. I am a Berry Juice variant, so unless he gets very lucky on his Rock Blast hits, I believe he needs 5. He will not be able to knock me out in 1. And I'll be able to throw off a big Scald and knock this thing out immediately, which is great. I don't need webs in this game, and Rhyhorn as a Pokemon I don't particularly switch well into. Rock plus Ground just rips my team, so I'll take this trade any day of the week. I am just going to stay in and click the Scald right here, as Rock Blast is only going to end up getting, I believe it is 3 hits, which is about the average, and then we're going to knock this thing right out with the Scald, which is amazing for me. Ponytail's going to come out next. I can't necessarily allow this thing to get up a sub, so I am going to drop to a Zen Headbutt, which is unfortunate, but I'll be able to get on my Pawniard and think I can knock it out with a Scarf knockoff, but it does show to be a Colberberry variant, and from here, we're just going to drop to a double kick. Unfortunately, it's just going to do way too much, and now while we have this thing weakened, we lost 2 big, pretty solid members on our team. Nothing to worry about, though. We're going to go into our Scarf Froakie. I can lock U-turn because it knocks this thing out or it grabs me momentum, and either way, I'm completely fine with that, as we are going to force in the Snubble. It's going to take 18, and I'm going to get out into my Croagunk for free here and just throw off a big Sludge Wave. Nothing really wants to take Sludge Wave into Focus Blast, as the Stunky's going to come out. It's going to take a big chunk and then throw off a big Fire Blast and burn me. Thankfully, we're special, though, and we're just going to knock this thing out with a Focus Blast from 61 there, which is great. Next up, the Ponytail comes out. I am going to save that, going to my Froakie. I knew I lived any Zen Headbutt. This not getting this damage off is definitely unfortunate, obviously in the long term of the game. But I did know that I lived that hit guaranteed, so might as well pivot out into it. His next turn, I am just going to drop a big U-turn. I'm going to crit the Grand Bull, do a ridiculous amount, and then get into my Croagunk, thinking I can once again just throw off a Sludge Wave and get a kill. However, it turns out that Josh is actually a choiced Scarf Snubble, and he's going to knock me out with an EQ, which allows me to get in my Dratini, and I'm just going to throw off a big hit right here, I believe, or throw off an Agility right here. I mean, an Agility special variant, and I can really punch a hole through this team right here, provided I, get some good rolls and, get some big damage off and things like that. So I am just going to Dragon Pulse this thing down. Chipping this thing down is also incredible for a Scarf Froakie endgame. We are a physical variant, so chipping this thing down to in range of Waterfall or U-turn or whatever it may be is great. He's going to be throwing off big Icy Winds, lowering my speed in conjunction with bringing me down to just 5 HP. This is completely fine, though. I'm just going to keep spamming Dragon Pulse. The Snubble's going to come out next, and here's where I make a big misplay. I'm going to make the play into my Geodude, thinking like, I take 2 play roughs, I can go ahead and get a Rocks or just off a big EQ, honestly, and kill something, which is amazing for me. Not really thinking like, oh, you died to Earthquake anyway, so there's no reason for him to not go for an Earthquake, and make a really bad pivot play out into my Geodude for realistically no reason. I'm going to pop my Juice for, again, no reason, and then risk taking another EQ and basically being dead at that point. So I'm going to switch out, sack off my Dratini now. Again, full realizing that that was a bad play. That was not my best play. Right here, I am just going to throw off a Waterfall, knock out this Snubble, which is great. And then Piplup's going to come out, and I'm kind of in a precarious situation. There's not really much I can switch into. Can't really switch into my Geodude. I can kind of just throw off Waterfalls and hope I don't get Scald Burnt. I can 1v1 this thing from this point in health, provided I don't get Scald Burnt, but it's definitely not ideal for me in the slightest. He is going to Icy Wind here, which makes sense to make this thing slower than his Ponyta. I'm going to throw off a Waterfall. Gonna take a big Scald for 41 and not get burned, which is great, and then knock this thing out with one more Waterfall, which is great. Ponyta's gonna come out, and from here, I'm gonna pivot into Geodude as a Zen Headbutt is going to miss, and this is game-changing as well, for sure. I've gotten incredibly fortunate in this game. Again, this game does not matter in the slightest when it comes to standings, but the miss meant that I could stay at full, not get 2-hit KO'd by Zen Headbutt into Double Kick, which you're gonna see does do a pretty big chunk right here, and could have potentially 2-hit KO'd me. I can get off a big Earthquake and knock this thing out. Now, I still do lose, though, in my mind, right? Because Q-Fan comes in, typically they run pretty fast, and typically they will be faster than my Geodude, who I believe only hits 11 speed this game, if I'm remembering the build correctly. So I should kind of come in, it should come in, click Iron Head, knock me out, and then live a hit for my Froakie, obviously, and knock me out in return from there as well. So this is looking almost like checkmate, unless he's a very slow Q-Fan for some reason, which it turns out he is, allowing me to get 80% damage off on this thing before it Iron Heads and knocks me out. Then I'm going to be able to go into Froakie and steal a 1-0 victory. I definitely got lucky this game. A lot of the other games, it looked like I got a lot of hacks, but I don't think it mattered as much as this game, where I definitely got super fortunate and probably lost the game otherwise. This is probably the game I care the least about, though, so I do feel bad because I know this game probably obviously wasn't fun for Josh, but I'll take it. That's an 8-0 season. Let's see if the undefeated curse gets us some playoffs, though. We'll be right back with round 1. Alright, so for playoffs, I decided last minute that since I do actually have my builds for playoffs, I might as well show you the teams a little bit more in depth. We're playing against Firefed in this game, which was our week 1 opponent. If you remember, he has like the Snivy, all that good, nice and scary stuff. I'll try and pop his team up on the screen. But as for the team that we're bringing again a full special Meowth with Faint, Water Pulse, Dark Pulse, and Hyper Voice. Again, does very solid in this game, honestly. Hyper Voice is going to hit things like neutral targets like Ponyta, Finneon, Starly, things like that very hard, whereas Water Pulse is for the Dwebble, Dark Pulse is for the Hone Edge, Hyper Voice obviously for like Snivy and things like that as well, so it does very solid in this game. We also have a Choice Scarf Dewpider, which again, I feel like does really well in this game, outside of something like the Finneon, but it doesn't want to switch in and take Bug Buzzes in the slightest. Now, I could have Giga Drain like I had in the last game, but I like the option of Scald for burns if I need to get a burn on something, or Surf for a little bit more damage to, really pump out some damage output, which is great. And then we have Webs as an option in case Snivy does not come. I do not want to give Snivy a speed boost, so I probably won't ever be clicking Webs if Snivy doesn't end up coming or is still alive, but it's something to keep in mind. I also have, again, a Lumberry Pawniard with Sword Dance, Knockoff, Sucker Punch, and Iron Head. Does really well in this game, man. If I can get a free Sword Dance up, which I can on a lot of things, I'll be in a good spot. The Lumberry, once again, is for Ponyta Flame Body or Will-O-Wisp for some reason if it Wisps. But realistically, I should be outspeeding and killing it and probably not staying in on a Ponyta as fast as them. But Venonat has Sleep Powder. The Finneon can Scald Burn me. The Snivy can Glare me. So there's a lot of status that can kind of deter Pawniard from setting up and really doing its thing and winning the game. And I want to make sure I have a deterrent to that, which is nice. We have an offensive rocking Geodude with Earthquake, Rock Blast, Stealth Rock, and Endure. Again, just a solid rocker in this game. Endure is great to guarantee proc or reduce and get back up sturdy against things like Ponyta or the Dwebble or the what do you call it? Honedge, the Starly. It really does well offensively and defensively this game, and Endure is a great way of kind of securing that. Then we have a Dark Pulse, Nasty Plot, Vacuum Wave, and Sludge Wave Krogunk. Another great win con with webs up. This thing can really put in a ton of work, so we just have to be careful about that, or have to be good about setting that up. And then we have a Choice Scarf Froakie with Surf, Ice Beam, U-Turn, and Hydro Pump. Again, just a good revenge killer to things like Ponyta. The Dwebble does well against things like Honedge as well. It really just does a lot of damage to his team in general, and if I can force in the Finneon, get U-Turn damage off, it's great for things like the Scarf Dewpider as well. So, really just a nice and offensive team that's here to come in, punch holes, do some damage, and, you know, put my opponent on the back foot for sure. That being said, though, let's jump into the battle. You can see that there is no Snivy. We have a Ponyta, Dwebble, Honedge, the Finneon, Starly, and the Venonat. I believe Venonat came over Starly this time, which is definitely pretty darn scary. Because I wasn't really super prepped for Venonat, and I didn't know what it did until the game started, and I had to kind of look it up in the team builder. But we're prepared, we're ready to go. Let's jump into round one. Okay. So we have our Froakie lead. I feel like it leads well versus anything. I can U-turn out on this Dwebble and kind of break it sturdy. I could really just U-turn out on everything in general. But it turns out to be a weak armor set, which tells me this is probably going to be something that's going to set up a bunch of hazards versus me, which also tells me I don't really have to worry about defog on my opponent's side. Therefore, I'm going to go ahead and get up my own rocks before knocking this thing out with a Rock Blast right here, as we do just 2-hit KO it. It was Eviolite, not Berry Juice most likely, and it's just going to go down there, which is, again, absolutely amazing. Next up, the Finneon is going to come out. I'm going to pivot into my Dewpider, take a Scald for a little bit of damage, not really have to risk burn, and I'm actually going to elect to get up my Sticky Webs here. I am going to die to a crit Air Cutter, which high crit move, not that big of a deal, and I was scarfed into Sticky Web anyway, so if anything, it was a little bit better for me. But what this does is it is going to, allow me to outspeed everything on my opponent's team with things like Pawniard and things like that, and really punch a hole through his team, which again, absolutely amazing. Now I'm going to go into Pawniard, and since I am a Lumberry variant, I'm not super worried about what this thing wants to go for. I'm going to go for a knock off this thing's Eviolite, as the Ponyta is going to come out and show to not be Boots, which is again another big roadblock in the way of my Pawniard winning the game. I am just going to go into my Geodude, die to a high horsepower. I don't think that crit ended up matter at 58. But again, this is completely fine, as I can go right out into my Meowth and just off a Water Pulse, do a bunch of damage to this thing and put in range of really everything else on my team. And Flare Blitz is going to actually just do that job for me, knock out the Ponyta, put me in a pretty good spot. Venonat's going to come out as I go into my Pawniard. I think realistically can kind of set up on everything and be in a good spot, minus the Honedge. I'm going to Swords Dance as the Sleep Powder comes out. And Lumberry is going to cause a super clutch here, and this is basically the game. There's not much my opponent can do from here to beat me. I am just going to knock this thing off, showing that it was actually Boots Venonat, which is very interesting. And then Honedge is going to come out, and despite it being Colbur, it's just going to die. This is a +2 Pawniard, baby. This thing is so damn strong. As the Starly's going to come out, I'm going to Sucker Punch, knock it out, and then out comes the Finneon, and we're going to clean up this game in a nice 3-0 fashion on the back of Pawniard, Swords Dancing up with that Lumberry and sweeping. So, despite kind of looking a little bit bad immediately, me losing 2 Mons pretty early, I feel like I was able to facilitate and set up this Pawniard endgame very, very easily, and turn into a 13-turn sweep, which is always really fun to have. So, that's going to be round 1. We got semifinals next. Let's do it. Alright, semifinals, we're going up against Gammon. He's got a terrifying team. In particular, he's got a Scraggy, which I am never excited to play, no matter what. In particular, this team I have doesn't really deal with it. And it's kind of like the crux of this team. Despite being 8-0 throughout the season, I've noticed all of my game plans are so offensively oriented, I have no backbone to fall back on. And if I don't overwhelm my opponent, they are going to overwhelm me. And I guess it's just Pokemon in general, but it's really tough to, construct, solid teams and game plans with matchups like these. Is what I guess I'm trying to say. But we're going to go through the team really quick. We have a Fake Out for attacks Meowth with Water Pulse for the Onyx, as well as Play Rough for the Scraggy to be able to OHKO that thing, and then Fake Out and Double Edge kind of just hit everything else. We have an Eviolite for attacks Krogunk with Drain Punch, Sucker Punch, Knock Off, and Earthquake. Does pretty solid. It's really strong Mon. And is a soft Scraggy check if it is not a Zen Headbutt variant, which it should be, obviously. Then we have our Dewpider rocking off Berry Juice, Water Bubble, Scald, Sticky Web, Endure, and Ice Beam. Endure is just to guarantee get off that juice if I really do need to and get back up to a healthy amount. Webs is if I can eliminate the Tentacruel that's going to be sitting there. And then just Scald plus Ice Beam hits things very, very hard overall. Then we have a Choice Scarf Froakie. Again, max speed allows me to kind of revenge a weakened +1 Scraggy, which is really nice if it is a DD variant. Surf, Ice Beam, Hydro Pump, and U-Turn. Very solid Scarfer in this game. We have a Life Orb Pawniard with just 4 attacks, Stealth Rocks. I didn't really see myself getting an opportunity to set up a Swords Dance this game, but it could potentially be an offensive rocker if I really do need it to. And honestly, just 4 attacks does really well, and it's really darn strong, especially if that's an Intim Scraggy, like Knockoff and Ironhead will just kill that thing, especially because we're Life Orb, which again, really, really nice. And Sucker Priority is great for a lot of things on the team. And then we have a D-Dance, Outrage, Extreme Speed, Waterfall, Dratini. Waterfall is for the Onix, E-Speed is to pick off weakened threats if we're not DD'd up, and Outrage just kind of cleaves through this team very, very well, which is obviously, really nice. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. You can see the 6 that Gammon brought. He brought Scraggy, Tentacool, the Onix, Voltorb, which I did not expect, the Pumpkaboo, and the Swoobat. I am going to lead off with my Dewpider, as I do live pretty much any hit that this thing wants to go for, especially if I'm an Eviolite variant. I can chew up a Thunderbolt pretty well, and because of that, I think he's going to more so elect to go for a Volt Switch. I'll be able to chew that up guaranteed, get my juice back and throw off a big Scald, maybe get a burn on that Tentacool, which could be incredibly clutch in order for me to chip that thing down, get up webs later, kind of be a nuisance that way. As, again, I don't really deal with Tentacle all too well. It's a little bit annoying for me. So I am just going to go ahead and click Scald, as I do live said Volt Switch as he does Volt Switch out. And again, I feel like I have to play very aggressive this game in order to put myself in a position to win, as I am going to get a crit with that Scald. It does turn out to be Berry Juice, and I don't get the burn, so it's not the biggest deal in the world. We get to pop his Juice, which is nice, but not the end of the world. He's going to go throw off a Double Edge right here, and I guess that's the best way he could, like, punish my switch in to Croagunk. And that crit does a lot of damage. The crit's unfortunate. Not the biggest deal in the world, though, as you're going to see as we go on here. But the fact that that was a crit and only did that much is pretty interesting. Now, if I got a burn, I would have been in a phenomenal position right here. But again, not the end of the world. I am just going to throw off a knockoff. I'm going to try and knock off the Juice of this Onix. Unfortunately, we're going to see that it is a weak armor variant. It was Juice, but it was weak armor and not sturdy. And I'm just going to elect to sack off my Croagunk. As nice as it is, I don't think I can afford to switch out and let anything else take an Earthquake into a Rock Blast, especially because this thing is a, Berry Juiced or weak armor variant, sorry. I don't have great ways of revenging it, so I'm going to get into my Froakie, and instead of knocking me out, he's going to elect to get up his rocks. Honestly, completely fine. A bit annoying, but not the end of the world. I am going to Ice Beam, knock this thing out. Scraggy's going to come out next. I can't let this thing set up for free, so I am just going to go ahead and Ice Beam. It would have 2-KO'd a non-Eviolite variant. It is going to turn out to be an Eviolite Moxie variant, which is a little bit unfortunate, but not the end of the world. In my head, I don't know if I confirmed Eviolite right here. I don't know if I was tunneling a little bit on the fact it might be Scarf or what it might be, but I am going to go into my Dewpider right here, and it's going to turn out that not only is he Eviolite, but he's incredibly, incredibly bulky, and has almost no speed attached to him. So I'm going to outspeed him with my very fast Dewpider right here, and do a good 54% to this thing while it knocks me off a knockoff. And while that is unfortunate, it is going to allow me the opportunity to come in and revenge this thing with my Meowth and just throw off, I believe, a big Double Edge, as that knocks out Tentacool from full, which is obviously very, very nice for me. Next up, Voltorb is going to come out. I believe I am just going to sack off my Meowth. It is going to be faster than me. The perks of being a Voltorb and having 20 base speed means he can outspeed Meowth raw, which is really unfortunate. I'm going to get into my Dratini on this double down, as he does end up going into his Scraggy. He's going to knock off my Eviolite, but I knew I could live any one hit, and from here, I'm just going to throw off a big Outrage and knock this thing out. We're going to be able to punch a sizable hole in my opponent's team. He's going to go into his Voltorb, showing to not be static, but actually Aftermath. And this is unfortunate because it's going to put me in range of either Shadow Sneak from Pumpkaboo or any here from Woobat, if it is like a Scarf variant of Woobat, as I'm going to get confused. And we are going to see it is Scarf Woobat. I think the reason that he went Voltorb and sacked that off first was because it guaranteed put me in range of Heat Wave to where he didn't have to lock Psychic on my Pawniard coming in case I was a Swords Dance variant or something like that, or I could just knock off and 2-KO his Pumpkaboo if he was like a Cold Berry or something like that. So I think that's why he ended up making that sack play first, which definitely makes sense. I am going to go down right here. I'm going to go into my Pawniard, and right here I'm kind of faced with a conundrum, because in my head, I was faced with a conundrum in my mind, but in hindsight, I really shouldn't have made this play, right? Because in my head, I'm thinking, okay, in order to avoid this 50-50, he's going to pivot out into the Pumpkaboo, and then he's going to try and burn me or something like that. He's going to try and throw a Fire Blast, but in reality, if he's Colbur Berry Pumpkaboo like I was thinking, there's no reason for him to switch out. I Sucker Punch and knock him out, but then he should be able to go into his Pumpkaboo and 2-hit KO me with Fire Blast or something like that, or Wisp me into Fire Blast, whatever it may be, whatever Mind Games comes down to it. It's in his best interest to get into the Pumpkaboo for free, opposed to trying to get into it on a Sucker Punch right here, because if I do knock off, he just kind of loses the game. So I'm going to make a knockoff play right here, expecting that pivot out, but realistically, he didn't have a reason to make it, but I am going to get bailed right here and dodge a Heat Wave, and this is incredible. I'm going to knock out this Woobat. The game still isn't over, being that I'm Life Orb. He's going to come with this Pumpkaboo, and he actually does live this knockoff, as he's a very bulky set, and he's going to throw a Fire Blast and miss. And I basically won the game off of those 2 misses, 100%. I feel really bad for Gammon. He had a great season. And you can see, I feel super bad about that, especially losing semifinals like that. I would be incredibly frustrated if I were him. And we didn't necessarily deserve this win. I'll be 100% honest. We've gotten very lucky throughout many points in the season, but this one in particular felt like it was the cheesiest one that I got. So I do feel bad for Gammon here. But you know, like I said before, in order to have a good season, in order to have an undefeated season, I think you need to have a little bit of luck. And that was definitely very fortunate on my end. But yeah, that's going to be it. So I know this is where the video's stopping, and you're thinking like, hey, isn't there another game? There is. There's a finals game. It has already been played, but I wanted to record, sit down with Inversify, who is my finals opponent. We were going to kind of go over our builds, and we were going to kind of commentate the game together and call, and kind of give you the perspective of not only myself, but his side, and we're going to go over the game that way, which could be really fun. So that video should be going up hopefully in a couple days, if at the latest next week. And yeah, let me know if you guys enjoyed the Little Cup content. I love making LC content. I love the format. I love uploading LC Wi-Fi, uploading these movies of my showdown runs for showdown leagues and Little Cup and things like that. So if you guys want to see more LC, let me know. I've been thinking about bringing back APA LC Wi-Fi for one last season before Scarlet and Violet. And if you guys are wanting to see us do that, I could definitely get a season going this summer, and you know, or at least before Scarlet and Violet, and I think it could be a lot of fun. So let me know if you guys are interested in that. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed, sub if you're new, and I'll see you in a couple days of finals. Maybe we'll get that undefeated season. Who knows? Adios, guys.